Hello everyone, Pastor Howie here with a continuing reading through the scriptures, readings and thoughts that I have from the scriptures. And we are returning to the Gospel of John, chapter 20, and the third section in chapter 20, dealing with Jesus' appearance to Thomas. So we've seen already in this chapter, just by way of review, since it's not a super long chapter, but there's short little sections. So the first 10 verses, we see the account, John's account of the empty tomb being discovered by Mary Magdalene, and then being witnessed by Peter and John. Then Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene after Peter and John go back to tell the other disciples what they found. They found an empty tomb. So Jesus actually appears to Mary first. Peter and John didn't see Jesus. They just saw that empty tomb. And then after that, in the evening, and skipping over the appearance of Jesus to the two disciples in Emmaus, Jesus appears to his disciples in the upper room, most likely where they had had the Last Supper, where Jesus had begun the discourse, the discussion, the preparation of the disciples for what was imminently going to happen. And so he appears to them, but he doesn't appear to all of them. He appears to 10 of them. Judas, of course, was gone, and Thomas wasn't there. So we come in this video to this third section, verses 24 through 29 of the Gospel of John, chapter 20, where Jesus appears to Thomas. And so here's John's account. Now, Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." Now, John is careful to identify for us who Thomas is. Thomas is the Aramaic name for Didymus, and Didymus is the Greek name for Thomas, and both of them mean the twin. So Thomas had a twin brother. I'm not really sure that I know who his twin brother was and if his twin brother was one of the disciples, but that's not the point. It's just an interesting side point that John is careful to identify who this person is to those who are residents of Galilee and commonly spoke Aramaic, but also to the Greeks. And so he translates both names. Anyway, he's one of the 12. His disciples tell him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, now this is a continuation of the appearance of Jesus to his disciples. It's the same night. But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now let's face it, these guys were struggling all along with the identity of Christ and the reaction of people and the fact that Jesus was not appearing as the Messiah that they had traditionally expected. He definitely was appearing as the Messiah, as the scriptures revealed the Messiah would appear. But down through the centuries, the Jews had come up with their own ideas and their own interpretations about what the appearance of Messiah would be like. And of course, they were expecting the Messiah to overthrow the Romans and restore the kingdom of Israel. And this Messiah, who people were proclaiming as the Messiah, who himself was identifying himself as the Messiah, wasn't living up to their expectations. Isn't that sad? that sometimes God does not live up to our human expectations. That's, of course, the bubbling up of our human pride, that somehow or another we understand God so much that we can correct him if he's not living up to our expectations. The fact of the matter is, as Paul tells the Romans, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. In other words, all of us have not lived up to God's expectations. But Jesus did. And Jesus, in his grace and his mercy, understands people like Thomas who have doubts because it doesn't seem like Jesus is living up to his expectations. And so he's honest. He tells them, unless I can physically touch him, I will not believe he has been raised from the dead. He saw, Thomas was with them and probably saw, Thomas probably was with the disciples and saw Lazarus come out of the tomb. So he no doubt, let's play on his word, doubting Thomas, but on his name, but he no doubt understood that Jesus had the power to raise the dead. But I think his grief and his sorrow was so deep that it impacted him to the point where, unless I actually see him and touch him, you claim to have seen him and touched him, but unless I see it, I will not believe. So a week later, verse 26. A week later, and in time we're talking about, this first appearance happened on the Lord's Day, the first day of the week, Sunday we call it. Jesus' tomb was discovered empty very early in the morning. He appeared in Luke's gospel, two disciples on the way to Emmaus as they walked and were talking about all of these things. He appeared to Mary Magdalene first of all, and the other gospels say that she was not alone. There were other women with her when they went to the tomb. Mary Magdalene is kind of focused on here in John's gospel. He appeared to the disciples that Sunday evening. So now a week later, the disciples are in the same place and probably at the same time in the evening, although we're not told that necessarily. But we're told a week later, on Sunday, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, they were still afraid of the Jewish officials, maybe even the Romans. Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Same greeting. Maybe that's how we should greet each other. Actually, it's the traditional Jewish greeting, shalom, and it's not a bad greeting. But anyway, Jesus says again, "Peace be with you," plural. Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." So a little bit of a rebuke, a gentle though and merciful rebuke. No evidence that Thomas actually did those things, because the very next verse says, Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed." And here's John's message for all the rest of us. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Once again, remind you of John chapter 3, verse 16, where John writes in his commentary regarding Jesus' interaction with Nicodemus, who was curious, perhaps on the verge of believing. We're never told that he became a disciple, but the indication is here in John chapter 19 that he was bold enough to come and help Joseph of Arimathea bury the body of Jesus. That gives us a good indication. And even before that, Nicodemus stood up for Jesus, at least in the sense of we can't condemn him unless we hear him ourselves. We'll probably have to wait until we get to heaven ourselves to find out if we get to meet Nicodemus. But I think Nicodemus came to believe. I know Thomas came to believe. And the question is, do we believe? Or are we so doubting because of so many lies and so much false propaganda surrounding us in this fallen world, this increasingly confused and deceived and deluded world in which we live, that it's impacting our faith? John tells us, for God so loved the world that he gave his one Son, his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him may not perish but have eternal life. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Someday we all will see. Jesus will come again. Every eye will see him. Every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess that he is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Whether or not they believe prior to that moment, whether or not they are followers of Jesus at that moment, when he comes, we will see. The grace of God saves us through the faith that he gives to us, that we might believe, and we are invited to believe. Don't wait around until you can see Jesus physically with your eyes. For if you're not a believer at that moment, then you will not be with Jesus in eternity. Blessed are they who have not seen and yet believed. May you be blessed. And may you, with opened spiritual eyes and spiritual ears and spiritual hearts, believe. No matter what this world throws at us, no matter how it tries to divide us and confuse us, believe in Jesus. That's what I have for you today in this video. Till next time, be blessed, and peace be with you.